Hello, I'm Melanie Risden with the Western Standard. Thanks for joining me. Also joining me today is Katherine Kowalchuk. She is a Calgary lawyer, but is now actually going to be running for the Independence Party of Alberta leadership. So we're going to just chat with Katherine a little bit today, and we're going to find out a little bit more about, first and foremost, what Alberta independence looks like and why this is near and dear to your heart, Katherine.
Well, thanks, Melanie, for having me here today. First of all, as you know, I've been quite involved in the freedom movement and quite outspoken the past few years in particular with respect to the government mandates and policies that have come out with respect to lockdowns, masking, and COVID-19 in general. And that is really what motivated me. That and quite frankly and honestly, the fear for my children's future.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've been paying attention for quite some time now, even prior to COVID, about the trajectory of where our society is going. And quite honestly, I don't personally agree with where it's going in many respects. And so I felt that it was necessary to pivot from my advocacy, not necessarily as a lawyer, because I'm still a full-time lawyer and I'm still advocating from that perspective, but I realized that I needed to do something different, which included, in my belief, a political solution. Because right now, what the Independence Party is advocating for primarily is a referendum on independence and giving back to Albertans a voice so that they are the decision makers in their own destiny. And that really appealed to me. You know, I wasn't always necessarily in favor of a separatist type of movement. In fact, I really didn't give it much thought. But earlier this year, I became informed and realized that under the Clarity Act, that this referendum on independence is a legal and viable option to increase our negotiating power so that Alberta can achieve the things that we've been trying to achieve, which is a fair deal within the Confederation in Canada for decades.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've been a practicing lawyer for 20 years in family law. And I know you and I have spoken in the past. We chatted about a ruling that came down for one of your clients with regard to he was looking to protect his child from being vaccinated with the COVID-19 vaccine, as his wife would have liked to have seen. So I'm guessing that as a lawyer and watching some of those situations and cases unfold and seeing these rulings, that's sort of the background that you're coming from, the idea that you're watching, our justice system be affected or some would say infected. So let's talk a little bit about things from the legal side of your perspective.
Yeah, certainly. You're absolutely right. And in fact, when that decision, and it was a father, a separated father, divorced father, who was trying to, well, his position was he wanted to wait and see before vaccinating the children. They had received previous vaccinations, so it wasn't that he wasn't in favor of vaccination, but he wanted to wait and see so that he could make an informed decision.
Right.
And his ex-wife obviously thought otherwise. And the children did have some reservations around it too, of course, but children are children, and they don't necessarily know all the facts. So
right.
when that ruling came out, and that ruling was really indicative of what had been going on across the country up until that point from a family law perspective. Now, I've been practicing primarily in family law exclusively for the past 8 or 9 years, but I do have other, I did practice in other areas of law before that. But, when I chose family law, the thing that appealed to me about family law was the true human-to-human connection and really helping families who are going through really challenging circumstances and navigating that. And there's nothing more that I dislike is ending up in a courtroom to have to litigate an issue. But it is necessary in some cases. But what was pivotal for me was the ruling in that case. Not only was the mother given the ability, the authority to vaccinate the children, she was also given primary health decision-making over all healthcare-related matters, which was, up until that point, the parties had not had a previous history of not being able to make those decisions together as joint guardians and joint decision makers for the children. So the judge ruled in that way as well. And also, very disturbingly, the justice ruled that my client, and he was not allowed to permit any third party to ever discuss COVID-19 or the vaccinations with the children again. And, as we've seen in other cases, like, Justice Germain's ruling earlier that compelled speech.
Yes.
That's very problematic in a democracy. And I think that there's a group of us lawyers, but for myself in particular, I was really optimistic at the beginning of COVID that the courts were going to be the sober, reasoned decision maker with respect to the government overreach. But the absolute opposite has occurred. And so, knowing that the likelihood of getting a fair result, a just result in the courts was unlikely, that's really another thing that's motivated me to shift into a political realm to see if we can make some changes where it counts, and that is to become the lawmakers.
Now, you had sort of banded together and sort of co-founded Lawyers for Truth. Is it more of an advocacy group, or were you with that group representing people? What was happening with that group?
Well, Lawyers for Truth is not a law firm. We're very clear about that. And we're a group of people, lawyers and other professionals, who came together as a result of the mandatory masking right at the very beginning. And we don't Lawyers for Truth. So Lawyers for Truth does not take on any legal cases per se. We refer people and connect people to lawyers across Alberta and across the country who are either facing fines, employment issues with respect to wanting to maintain their bodily autonomy, and also family law issues as well.
Right. And so with this background, 20 years of working within the law, seeing how it is shifting or how it has shifted over these couple of years, would you say that's a good qualifier for you to become a leader in Alberta?
I think so. Yeah, I think that, as much as lawyers have, people have their opinions about lawyers, and, I often say to people that I speak to, don't hold that against me. I do think that, lawyers go to school and are trained in a unique way, and we're trained to understand the legislation and really do a thorough cost-benefit risk analysis for their client. We're trained to look at all angles of a particular issue, regardless of what it is, to help our clients make their own informed decision about the instructions that we receive. And, I'm very, very proud of my practice because, I said earlier that I don't like going into court, and I have gone into court, but I really pride myself on my reputation and track record for getting my client's matter resolved outside of court. And I would say the vast majority, over 90% of my cases, settle either through a mediation process or just through negotiations and discussions between counsel. And I think that is really what I would bring to the table with respect to what really is essentially a divorce from Canada.
What else qualifies you to be a good candidate for running Alberta?
Well, I'm 100% dedicated to this. I have the courage. I think I've demonstrated to Albertans through my advocacy, particularly in the past 2 years, that I'm not afraid, and that this is something that is near and dear to my heart. And living in a society where the laws are respected, the rule of law is enforced, and that people are held accountable is very important to me, because what I've seen over the past number of years is that many politicians and other elites, let's call them, might go through the exercise of seeming to be held accountable, but nothing ever comes to fruition. And I really believe that because I've been so outspoken and I'm passionate about this issue and about making sure that Alberta is the best province and most prosperous province possible, that my personality and my integrity stand for itself.
Mm-hmm. There's probably a lot of people who have heard discussion of the separatist movement, or, you know, Alberta's sovereignty, and discussion around the Sovereignty Act. Why don't you paint a little bit of a better picture for people who may not understand what an independent Alberta would look like?
Well, not only does the Independence Party advocate for the referendum on independence, which will provide us with the leverage in Ottawa to either open up negotiations with Ottawa to get a deal for Albertans, or for us to chart our own course. And without that leverage, I think that what we've seen with previous politicians, including Jason Kenney's response in how he dealt with the referendum on equalization, for instance, which was basically a letter writing campaign, if that, to Ottawa, regarding Albertans' desire to change equalization. I think that an independence-minded government will be a government, and under my leadership, will be the government that will address a myriad of things. Some of the things that are on the top of my list include doing a robust independent inquiry about the handling of COVID-19, and also to hold these people who were pivotal or connected with the decision-making and the rollout of all aspects of the last 2 years accountable, both civilly and criminally. And the other thing is, I think that an independent, under my leadership, I'm seeking to not only hold elected governmental officials accountable, I want to address the bureaucracy. I think that as a society, we've become too accepting and complacent of a nanny state type of top-down government, where the government dictates to the citizens, more like subjects rather than citizens, that what they are to do and how they are to conduct their life. And I think the majority, a vast majority of the bureaucracy needs to be fired. And it's a strong word, but I don't see any other way of sugarcoating it, because we are a highly regulated province. We're a highly regulated country, and it's impeding commerce, and it's impeding and encroaching on basic the abilities for families and individuals to do basic things. And, you know, you need a regulation or a license or a fee to do almost anything these days. And I want to see that end. And so I'll be looking at reducing government substantially. Also, I believe I'm well qualified to tackle the legislation. We need to look at the legislation that violates the rights and freedoms of individuals now, and we need to repeal it. So, for example, the Public Health Act. The Public Health Act is very problematic, and it's been on the books for over 20 years. But that legislation gave Dr. Dina Henshaw, I call her Hee-Haw, the power to do what she did. And the fact that a bureaucrat was given that much authority must never happen again. And so legislation such as that violate these rights and freedoms must be repealed. You know, all of our laws are subject to, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Bill of Rights, Alberta Bill of Rights. And the Alberta Bill of Rights in the preamble talks about how all laws, regulations need to be subject to the Bill of Rights, right? So what I've seen, though, is that laws are being created, regulations are being created that contradict and fly in the face of these fundamental principles that we've I've grown up believing to be true. In addition to repealing the laws, though, I think we need to also implement laws to ensure that this does not happen again and be strong in what we're doing. For instance, I want to table legislation very early on upon forming government that prevents any employer from ever discriminating against an employee for health-related matters.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get rid of the mandatory masking. These sorts of things are not within the purview of government, I believe. And I'm a very big advocate for trying to do my best to eliminate censorship, and I think that we need to restore parent and property rights back to individuals and families where they belong.
Mm-hmm. So in Alberta, I guess the idea of an independent Alberta, people who don't really understand what that looks like, how does that keep us part of Canada but yet separate us? I think some people are seeing it as we would literally be cut off from Canada, from the CPP, from the RCMP, things like that. So your vision of what this looks like for the province, can you sort of speak to that? How do we participate in Canada?
Well, I think it's going to really depend on how the negotiations go.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, I'm prepared, and the Independence Party is advocating for and prepared to leave Canada, which means that what would happen is that Alberta would become a constitutional republic, its own country, and would have the exact same services that you are speaking about right now. Provincial police force, its own pension, and public services, to same as you would have right now as a citizen of Canada.
Now, financially, how is that beneficial for Albertans? I think there's a financial picture and worry that coming out of Canada, coming out of the country, would be detrimental. Speak to that a little bit.
Well, I think the actual opposite is true. I think that when you factor in the equalization payments that we give annually, and that we only get a third of it back, and the fact that federal income tax would be eliminated right off the top. When you look at the policies that we're proposing, that we want to enact based on the philosophy that we promote a free enterprise system with little government overreach, the fact that we will be very active in ensuring that our resources are competitively marketed and exported, and that we are a strong player worldwide, I think that immediately we will be better off just by reducing federal income tax and by eliminating the carbon tax, by eliminating those the equalization payment. Albertans will already be better off on day one.
Mm-hmm. And then as far as the role of Alberta on the global scale, being its own country, as you're referring to it, a bit landlocked, being that it's sort of separated from any kind of waterways when it comes to sort of the export of oil. We really, our option is to go south. How do you plan to mitigate that challenge or that barrier?
Well, I think that it will be in the best interest for our neighbors to negotiate with us, because we are such a resource-rich province, that they are going to want, I believe, to work with us in order to facilitate the commerce that will only benefit their provinces. And not only that, I believe that there's a movement growing in Canada, and a general distrust of especially the federal government in Ottawa and legacy political parties to be able to get the job done. And I suspect, there's a growing movement in BC and in Saskatchewan in particular with respect to this. And they're really looking to Alberta to see with a lot of interest to see, that when we can do this, how it's done. And many people have reached out to the party to start speaking about how they might engage in their own independence movement themselves. And so I don't see it being an issue. And besides which, I think that Albertans are, because we have such a strong economy, and I think that out of all the provinces in Canada, we have by far the best option and ability to carry out this endeavor, that we will be lucrative and successful in the ultimate negotiations internationally to ensure that the existing contracts continue, and albeit a little bit differently, likely under a different governing model that we're proposing, but that I think that the majority of the people around us and our international partners will probably be quite willing to negotiate with us.
So you've been doing a lot of traveling around and speaking with Albertans over the last few months. And what have you heard from Albertans as far as concerns about an independent Alberta that you can sort of speak to, and perhaps even some you anticipate, but have a plan to work through?
I think most of the concerns stem around fear, and not understanding what the benefits are around independence, and also, of course, their Canadian identity. I mean, that's a big one, and I understand that, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that they have to not be Canadian, right, as well. Alberta just needs to do something different. We have been trying, the government of Alberta has been trying to get a better deal with Ottawa since it joined Confederation. And quite honestly, nobody's been able to do that. The Reform Party wasn't able to do that. And, right up until, Jason Kenney not being able to do that, even with a referendum to renegotiate or end equalization in the last referendum. And so I think that it's that fear of uncertainty. But based on the information that I've read and the research that I've done, I think that it is the only tool that will be effective in giving us the leverage we need to open up the Constitution. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know where things are going to go ultimately. But if Ottawa understands that we as Albertans are serious about this, you can best be sure that they will come to the table with ears to listen.
Right. And so with that, depending on how the negotiations go, will depend on how the Independence Party of Alberta pushes forward with how much independence we are seeking, right? Like, so what you're saying is if the federal government does come to the table and negotiate, then we could stay within Confederation, but with a better deal, as you call it.
Well, and nothing's off the table, right? I think that we have to be able to look at the political climate at the time, what is happening to our economy at the time. I think we would, but if negotiations fail, i.e. they're ignored or obstructed in any way, then that clear majority pursuant to the Clarity Act will give us the authority to chart our own course. And I think that's really important. And after all, that's what Quebec was able to achieve, a better deal within Confederation in Canada with their efforts years before.
So if we were to be able to achieve similarly what Quebec has, would that be enough for the Independence Party of Alberta to stay within Confederation?
Well, you know what? That will have to be up to the members.
Yeah.
I mean, and the citizens of Alberta, ultimately. And I'm just one vote and one voice. And so, my style is to advocate for the constituents and advocate for the citizens of Alberta and what they want. The referendum, if we are blessed with being given the opportunity to form government in the next election, then we believe we have the moral authority based on our platform and our policies and what we stand for to have the referendum within the first year of forming government, and that's what we're intending to do. And thereafter, we'll be working on all of these other things that I've discussed in the meantime as an independence-minded government that desperately need to be addressed so that we can improve Albertans' position just within Alberta without the constraints of government that are tied to these globalist organizations that have really put us under their thumb. And so I don't want to say that, I want to say that everything is possible, but know that my preference is to work for the best interests of Albertans first.
Right. Now, the leadership vote for the Independence Party of Alberta is in September. What's the date of that?
It's September 10th.
Okay. And there is a deadline to become a party member in order to participate in that vote, and that deadline is tomorrow.
That's tomorrow. That's right. August 20th is tomorrow, and it's shaping up to be a really fun political leadership race, and I'm excited about it. But certainly, if Albertans want to be a part of this process and choosing the next leader for this movement, a leader that has wide appeal to, or could have wide appeal to the majority of Albertans, and has the background and the competency in order to, take the next step to sever ties legally with Canada. This is their opportunity to join the party, become a member, and then vote on the 10th.
Now, you have a website that people can go to learn a little bit more about you, get some more idea on your thoughts and background and strategy, and then as well links through to the Independence Party of Alberta website where they can become a member.
That's
and
right.
The website is?
It's www.katherinekowalchuk.ca.
Yeah, and we'll have that up on the story as well, so that people can click through to it.
And I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and happy to answer any questions. And you can also reach me through email on my website, and again, happy to answer any questions.
So that's Katherine Kowalchuk, and she is running for the Independence Party of Alberta. And Katherine, we just want to thank you for coming in and sharing some of the vision that you have for Alberta, and I think more importantly as well, sort of where this has come from for you and why this is so near and dear to your heart.
Thank you, Melanie, and thank you for all the work you're doing as well.